up against the Coyotes. Ranta, well, he was heading for the bench and a face plant on his way there.
He was going to the bench. I'm convinced he must have thought there was a delayed penalty. And the bench is like, Tuca, get back. Look at him. They're like, get back.
Gets to the Dallas line and sends the puck in deep.
As we've talked about in my previous videos, because of the fast-paced intensity, we are talking about one of the last gladiator sports in the world. Throwing hits, taking slashes, chucking fists, while at the same time playing on ice going 40 kilometers per hour. And as a result of all this chaos, the NHL, more than any other professional sport, has the most random outcomes, which not only leads to epic underdog stories, but it has also led to some of the most ridiculous stat lines in all of sports. Like perhaps the unfortunate or maybe well-deserved story of Patrick Seeloff. Because after being the prototypical, shutdown, hard-nosed defenseman, Patrick went his entire hockey career not being the guy who was relied upon for his offense. It just wasn't his game. Which is why, after only putting up a nice 2 points in 24 games, Seeloff would still be considered a top prospect and would be drafted in the second round by the Flames. And so after spending the next several years developing in the OHL and within the minor league system, Patrick would get his shot as he would play a single game in the 2015-2016 season, and shockingly would end up with a +1, 2 blocks, and 3 hits. Not to mention my man would score his first NHL goal.
Seeloff up on the rush. The backhand scores, deflected in!
Which just so happened to be the game winner. Not too shabby, Seeloff, you enforcer defenseman. He would then be traded to the Ottawa Senators for Alex Chiasson. And I kid you not, in his first and only game of the season, my god, he would do it again.
There's Seeloff with a shot that goes off the outside of the post, bounces in!
Scoring a goal in that single game. In fact, Patrick has only played 2 NHL games in his entire career. And why, you ask? No, this is not another example of Jeremy Williams, who after getting called up would score in 4 debuts in a row, and then proceed to get sent down with the Leafs year after year without receiving a real shot. No, this is not the same, because Patrick Seeloff had a major incident, or incidents, because during a practice scrimmage, Seeloff, who was evidently way too aggressive, would absolutely crush veteran Clark MacArthur, who, keep in mind, spent the majority of the last several seasons dealing with near career-ending concussion symptoms. Like, yes, you're trying to prove yourself within training camp, you have to make an impact. But to be that aggressive is absurd, especially against a vet. Like, you were asking for a one-way ticket to the minors. And after this hit, Chris Neil would take this matter into his own hands, laying a beating on Seeloff. However, this was just one incident. Wrong, because in a scrimmage the very next training camp, Patrick, my man, would try to make an open ice hit on Mark Stone. Like, excuse me? Except Stone stood him up, you know, gave him a little whack. Like, why the hell are you doing this? It's practice. And as a result, Patrick Seeloff would then proceed to swing at Mark Stone with his stick. Like, are you kidding me? So this is now 2 incidents in a 1-year span of him trying to lay out his own teammate in practice. And because of this, Patrick Seeloff would be instantly sent down and basically blacklisted from the Sens and just the NHL. Even with his 2 solid debuts, including 2 goals in 2 games, he would never have another chance. He would retire and is now playing in Germany. But this is just a bizarre story of an enforcer defenseman who somehow scored 2 goals in his only 2 games. One of them being just a crazy game winner, to being known as the guy trying to injure his teammates, ruining his entire future of being an NHL player. Over the history of the NHL timeline, the NHL in just hockey has been witnessing a seismic shift in terms of a country's representation. In the early 70s, 96% of NHL players were maple syrup licking Canadians. However, after the mid-70s NHL expansion, introducing teams such as the Canucks, Buffalo Sabres, and of course everyone's favorite Kansas City Scouts, the entire game started to shift. Because within a decade, Canadian representation would go from 96% all the way down to 84%, with other countries such as Sweden having 25 times more players within a decade. However, in the 80s, after names such as Mike Bossy, rest in peace legend, and Wayne Gretzky dominating the game, we would see yet another exponential decrease in Canadians, now at 73%, in the doubling of American players. In the 90s, this would once again stagnate, with around 70% of the league being Canadians. However, just this past season, Canadians now represent 41% of the league. Crazy, especially considering that just in the 80s, on average, 21 players on a 23-man roster were Canadian. And with the very evident development of hockey programs across the world, we have seen some incredible overseas legends, like Yuta Fukafuji, representing Japan, or perhaps Goran Bazina, born in Croatia, and he played 3 games for the Coyotes. And what has to be one of the most ridiculous stats that I've come across is Freddie Andersen, born in Denmark, currently sits 10th of all time for scoring in his country, with a total of 13 points. Considering that we have seen names such as Frans Nielsen, Lars Eller, oh my god, Nikolai Ehlers, Bjorkstrand, also being from Denmark, because the fact that there's been so much disparity in a country's talent is absurd. And speaking of disparity, let's talk about the insanity of the Art Ross history. Because since 2002, there's been 14 different Art Ross winners, with Connor McDavid having the most at 3. However, from 1980 all the way up to 2001, so we're talking about 3 different decades, several eras in the hockey timeline. Only Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux, and Jaromir Jagr took home the Art Ross. In all 30 of those seasons, only 3 players won, which also included one of the most impressive, you know what? The most impressive Art Ross wins in the game's history. Because after coming onto the scene in the mid-80s, Mario Lemieux was the next great one. Not only was he 6'4", with the ability to outskill, outpower any other player in the game, but he would of course have many record-breaking seasons, including a 199-point season. However, during the 1993 season, Lemieux had what could have been a career-ending cancer. I mean, playing while sick and still producing is impressive enough, as Lemieux had to get emergency neck surgery from Hodgkin's disease to remove an enlarged lymph node. And in a season battling illness, where he would have no choice but to miss 24 games due to treatment, Mario Lemieux would shockingly put up 69 goals. Nice. 160 points in only 60 games. Ridiculous, as he would take home the Art Ross trophy, playing a whopping 24 games less than Pat LaFontaine, while also still having 12 more points than him. But what is even more absurd is the fact that on an 84 game pace, Super Mario would have been on pace for 224 points, which would have shattered Gretzky's single season record of 215 points. Not to mention that he played that whole season sick, and he ended it recovering from a serious surgery. And it makes you think, what would have happened if he wasn't sick? As Mario Lemieux, even with his amazing career, is hands down still one of the greatest what ifs in the game's history. Lemieux would end his career playing with Sidney freaking Crosby. This man is a legend.
Wins come back, Lemieux to Crosby, he scores! And they beat the clock. Crosby's second of the game.
But somehow, this longevity, playing time, doesn't even come close to Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey. Because after playing for nearly 2,200 games, split between the WHA and NHL, after starting his career in the 1940s, and ending it in the 80s, so you know, just nearly a nice little 40-year career, Gordie Howe has been the only player in history to play so long that he could play with his own son, who was born when Gordie Howe was 27, already 9 years into his career. And on the topic of goals, after a legendary career with the Calgary Flames, Theo Fleury went against all odds, standing in at 5'6", and would set an NHL record, as my man wouldn't just score 1 shorthanded goal, which alone is impressive enough, not 2, but Fleury in 1991 would score a shorthanded hat-trick. I repeat, a shorthanded hat-trick. Absurd, in one of which was even the game-winning goal, as Theo Fleury is the only player in history to score 3 goals, all on the PK, on top of being the shortest player ever to end up top 5 in Selke voting that same season. Yet, this stat doesn't even top the goal record Shane Doan had set back in 2012, because as we have clearly established, the NHL is so random, so chaotic, that even a 4th line enforcer mutant who averaged 6 minutes of playing time would score a hat-trick with the Atlanta Thrashers.
This is not many times have we seen a workman-like effort. And there's another workman-like effort.
Trick.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Eric Bolton, a hat trick tonight.
As Shane Doan would set a record for playing over 1,100 NHL games with 39 2-goal games in his career without recording a single hat-trick. Like, how's that possible? However, during a game in 2012, Shane Doan had 2 goals, looking for that hat-trick.
Doan right to the net. He scored.
And with less than 5 seconds left in the game, he would go up ice and, well, he would do it.
Over the line, drops it, Doan takes a shot, he did it! Shane Doan! He got it!
But again, I'm an oxygen tank. Look at Ray Whitney, he's looking for him.
Except with 0.001 seconds on the board, meaning he was 0.001 seconds from never scoring a hat trick, that Shane Doan would get his first hat trick after 40 two-goal game performances.